Hey everybody, it's me, Steve Schnee, the CD Junkie. On this episode of CD Junkie, I'm going to be discussing a band by the name of The Cure. Now, I'm not going to cover the whole career. I'm only going to cover the first decade, because obviously this would make it a much longer video, and people sort of lose interest after 2, 3, 4 minutes. So probably be longer than that. But anyway, I usually like to start these videos out by telling you how I got into the band. Basically, I walked into Tower Records in Buena Park. This is back in 1980. And I was flipping through the records because I was always trying to discover new bands. So if I had an extra $5 or $10 in my pocket, I'd be going through the record bins. Even if I didn't have money in my pocket, I'd still be looking to see what I was going to buy when I had $5 or $10. Well, I came across the LP of this album, Boys Don't Cry. It was 1980. It was on PVC Records, which is a label started by Marty Scott from Gem Records. And, you know, I looked at it and I thought, oh, yeah, whatever. And then I turned it around and I saw that it was produced by Chris Perry. Now, that instantly stuck in my mind because Chris Perry co-produced the first Jam album in the city, and I was a huge Jam fan. And I thought, oh, there's 3 guys in this band. It's a trio produced by Chris Perry. This has to be another Jam. So I plunked down the money, went home, and they were not another Jam. The Cure was entirely different. On first listen, I was entirely disappointed with what they sounded like, but that's only because I had built up a lot of expectation for this record, thinking it was going to sound like the Jam. But now that all my expectations had been leveled to the ground, I was able to approach the record in a fresh, new way. So the second time I listened to it, I loved it because it was different, because the songs were cool. You know, you had the title track, Boys Don't Cry. You had Jumping Someone Else's Train. You had 10:15 Saturday Night. You had Fire in Cairo. These great songs. They weren't exactly pop. It was post-punk with great hooks, great melodies. And so I became a fan. So I credit PVC Records for introducing a lot of people to The Cure, even though they don't get a lot of credit, because this Boys Don't Cry was an independent album. Now, what I found out like a month or two after this album came out was the fact that it was a compilation. Their first album was Three Imaginary Boys, and it actually came out in 1979. Now, a lot of the tracks from Boys Don't Cry are on this, but it's also got a lot of different tracks on it. It's actually even maybe less hooky. It's more post-punk sounding, but very unique, very different. This is the deluxe edition where they add a bunch of bonus tracks. Now, the thing about the Cure compilations is they don't really add just like all the B-sides and extended mixes and stuff. They add like demos and live tracks. You can find most of the B-sides on a box set called Join the Dots. So all these compilations are strictly the remastered album with a bunch of rarities, and that's perfect for Cure fans. If you're looking for B-sides and stuff, like I said, buy Join the Dots. Now, the same year they released Boys Don't Cry in the US, 17 Seconds was their second album in the UK. And this, again, is the expanded edition. This was a completely different sounding album. You could tell it was the same band because of Robert Smith, the vocalist. And if you want to know more about the band members, because each album basically had a shuffle of band members, go to Wikipedia, go to the band's website. I'm just going to talk about the albums. But this was entirely different. It was really moody. There was keyboards on it. And they started showing this reliance on these great bass riffs. So this album actually had some stunning tracks, including Play for Today. A Forest was the big track on this album. Really totally different. Almost took me by surprise, but I ended up loving it. In 1981, they came out with the album Faith, and this album sort of took them in the same direction that 17 Seconds had. This is, of course, the expanded edition there. Now, Primary is the big song on this, and of course, heavy reliance on these really great bass riffs. Now, the songs weren't these great pop verse, chorus, instrumental, chorus. No, they're very unique. And like I said about the last album, very moody, but still an absolutely wonderful sound. Now, in America, they didn't release those albums. What they did is they waited until those two were out. Then A&M Records released both albums in one package called Happily Ever After. Now, originally it was a 2 LP set. When it finally made it to CD for a very short time, it was a single disc. So you get both 17 Seconds and Faith on one CD. Now, in 1982, The Cure absolutely 100% lost me. Now, of course, they're really, a lot of people call them goth. Goth is, dark and menacing sometimes. But The Cure was always a haunting band. They didn't get dark. They got hauntingly beautiful. in my opinion. I guess it's just the way that you actually listen to it. But Pornography in 1982, I remember listening to this album. I heard the single Charlotte Sometimes, and I was hoping that the album was going to sound like that. That was a little darker, and it was a little heavier, not like heavier in a sonic way, but just when you listen to it, you kind of felt drained afterwards, but it was still a great song. So I was hoping that the album was going to go in that direction. Now, Charlotte Sometimes wasn't even on the album. I'll tell you, this album, I'm not, still to this day, not a fan of this album, although I still own it, because I have to own this stuff. Hanging Garden is worth it for me. I mean, the thing is I'm a pop kid. I was raised on the Monkees, Beatles, all that kind of stuff. So I was really going in for the hooks, for the harmonies, for all this kind of stuff. The Cure didn't offer that, but they offered something else. They offered something atmospheric and melodic. And this, I felt, was just too dirgy. And I've tried to get back to it. I mean, it's been 40 years since this album came out, and I still can't connect with it. So I was like, to you, The Cure, I'm going to go off and listen to something else. But then they did sort of an about face, and they started putting out these singles like Love Cats, Let's Go to Bed, The Walk. These things were super catchy. They still had sort of a darker post-punk edge to them, but they were far from goth. And those, I felt, were just absolutely fabulous songs, and I started paying attention to The Cure again. Now, those singles and EPs were combined on the CD called Japanese Whispers, and this came out in 1983, and it's put me back in love with The Cure again. Those are really, really great singles and great B-sides, and I was on board again. 1984, they released the album The Top. Now, the Caterpillar on this was in the same vein as the previous singles, but this was a little bit more eccentric, eclectic. It's still great because Robert Smith has this way of creating these really odd hooks and just pulls them out of the air. And sometimes with a Cure album, it takes you 2, 3, 4, 5 times before you finally understand what's going on. There's so many layers going on in their albums. It's really fantastic. Again, this is the expanded edition. Now, in 1985, The Head on the Door, they really went more commercial again. Still very strange, still approaching music in their own way. It's really a fantastic album. This is the album that has In Between Days and Close to Me on it, plus a lot of other great tracks. Now, of course, in Los Angeles, KROQ radio was all over these albums and just playing the heck out of them. So The Cure, they just went from strength to strength with each release, and probably by this time they might have been playing videos on MTV as well. So The Cure were just getting bigger and bigger with each release, which was really kind of fantastic because they are really a great band and very unique. Now, in 1986, out came a singles collection called Standing on a Beach, which is right there, and this was just a great introduction. A lot of people had maybe missed some of the earlier tracks or the mid-period tracks. It's a great introduction to the band's first 6 or 7 years. Really good collection. Now, Charlotte Sometimes is on there, so that's a nice way to get that song, which was not on any album thus far. Now, in 1987, they released Kiss Me, Kiss Me, Kiss Me, which was really their opus. It was a double album filled with songs that had that great classic Cure sound, but it was also moving in all these wonderful different directions. Now, this album here contains my all-time favorite Cure song, which is called Just Like Heaven, but it's also got The Kiss, and it's got Catch, and Why Can't I Be You, and Hey You, and a lot of great tracks. Really a fantastic record, very eclectic. They were throwing it all out there and seeing what stuck, and it all pretty much did. And of course, this brought them even more attention, which paved way for probably their biggest album called Disintegration that came out in 1989. This is a 3 CD version, which also contains their Entreat live album and also more bonus demos and odd tracks. Now, the songs on this album that were really, really popular were, of course, Pictures of You, Love Song, Lullaby, and I think probably the worst single off this was the first one. I think Fascination Street might have been the first single off this, and that kind of threw me off a little bit, but the rest of the album is just glorious. In fact, people just throwing that goth thing, oh, that album, oh, it looks so goth, oh my gosh. But if you listen to it, just throw goth out the window and listen to it, and you'll hear it's not goth. It's haunting. It's beautiful. The melodies, the atmospheres, and it's really a wondrous album full of great hooks. Maybe I should call them, instead of hooks, I should call them melodies, because this isn't a pop album which just has this wham bam chorus. They're sort of drawn out and just very emotional, and it's really actually a fantastic record. I mean, most everything The Cure released between 1979 and 1989 is worth your time. But that's it for this video. Maybe one day I will cover the later albums, but for now, I'm going to stick with the first 10 years. Remember to like, comment, share, subscribe, to ring that bell for future notifications. Leave a comment below, and until the next time, remember me. I'm Steve Schnee, the CD Junkie.